I took the job because my daughter needed braces, and the bank had started sending letters about the mortgage. The National Park Service posting promised overtime, housing allowance, and what they called isolation pay, 20% above standard rate for overnight shifts in the backcountry stations. I drove up through Gatlinburg on a Tuesday in October, past the taffy shops and miniature golf courses, watching the tourist clutter thin out as the road climbed into actual forest. The ranger station at Cades Cove was brick and functional, smelling like pine cleaner and old coffee. Superintendent Vickers met me in the parking lot, a woman in her 50s with iron gray hair pulled back tight enough to hurt. She handed me a laminated badge, 2 sets of keys on carabiners, and a radio clipped to a canvas belt. "You're assigned to Cataloochee Valley," she said. "North District. Station Charlie 7. It's a 40-minute drive from here, another 20 on foot once you park at the trailhead. You'll work Wednesday through Sunday, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. No exceptions on the timing." I nodded, waiting for more. "There's a binder in the cabin. Read it before your first patrol. All of it." She looked at me directly. Every page. "Inventory procedures, trail maintenance protocols, operational guidelines specific to Charlie 7. She opened the passenger door of a Park Service truck, gestured for me to get in. "You'll share the rotation with Ranger Hollis. He works Sunday night through Tuesday night. You'll overlap Sunday evening for handoff. He's been there 11 years. We drove in silence up Route 441, then turned onto a service road that wasn't on my phone's map. The asphalt gave way to gravel, then to packed dirt that wound through stands of tulip poplar and hemlock. Vickers parked at a chain barrier with a yellow sign, "Authorized personnel only. No camping beyond this point. From here you walk. Follow the orange markers. Don't leave the trail. The cabin's at the end." She handed me a mag light, heavy and cold. "Channel 6 for emergencies. Channel 11 for routine check-ins. Do not use Channel 3. "What's on Channel 3? "Nothing you need to worry about." She started the truck. "If you get the binder read before 6 tonight, you can start on time. If not, you wait until tomorrow night. The schedule is not flexible." She left me standing there with a backpack, a duffel bag, and the mag light. The orange markers were reflective strips nailed to trees every 30 yards. I walked. The trail sloped upward through mature forest, crossing a creek twice on log bridges that felt solid enough. Rhododendron crowded close in places, forming tunnels of waxy leaves. I saw 2 deer, does, calm, browsing on undergrowth. Normal. A woodpecker hammered somewhere to my left. Completely ordinary October afternoon in the Smokies. The cabin appeared after 43 minutes of walking, set in a clearing maybe 80 yards across. It was larger than I'd expected. 2 rooms visible through the windows, a covered porch, a stone chimney, a propane tank chained to the north wall. A steel tool shed stood 20 yards to the east. The clearing had been mowed recently, cut grass browning in neat rows. The door was painted green. The larger key on the carabiner fit the deadbolt. Inside smelled like wood smoke and citronella. The main room held a desk, a cot with wool blankets, a propane heater, a compact refrigerator humming quietly, and a table with 2 chairs. A door led to a small bathroom with a chemical toilet and a sink fed by a gravity tank. The second door was closed. A handwritten label was taped to it. "Storage. Do not enter between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. The binder sat in the center of the desk. 3 inches thick, black vinyl cover, no title. I sat down and opened it. The first page was typed on a manual typewriter, corrections made with whiteout. "Operational guidelines. Station. Charlie 7 revised, October 2019, for overnight. Personnel only." The next page began with a numbered list. I checked my watch. 2:14 p.m. I had 3 hours and 46 minutes. I started reading. The core rules were printed on yellow paper, hole-punched and inserted behind a laminated divider. 1. Between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., do not leave the cabin except for scheduled patrols at 9 p.m., midnight, and 3 a.m. Each patrol lasts exactly 45 minutes. 2. During patrols, stay on the marked trail. The trail is a loop. Cabin to the overlook, overlook to the creek junction back to the cabin. Total distance is 1.3 miles. Do not deviate. 3. If you encounter a hiker after dark, do not approach. Note their location and description. Report on Channel 11 after you return to the cabin. 4. If you encounter a bear after dark, verify it is moving on all fours before proceeding. If it is standing upright and does not drop to all fours within 10 seconds, return to the cabin immediately and skip the remainder of that patrol. 5. Do not acknowledge anyone who calls you by name while you are outside the cabin after dark. Respond only to Ranger or your badge number. 6. The east window in the main room must be covered with the blackout curtain between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Do not look out this window during those hours, even if you hear movement outside. 7. If you hear knocking on the cabin door between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m., do not answer. Do not look through the window to see who is knocking. Wait in silence until the knocking stops. 8. The storage room door must remain closed and locked between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. If you hear sounds from inside the storage room during these hours, do not investigate. Note the time and report on Channel 11 during your next scheduled check-in. 9. Check the tool shed lock at the start of each patrol. If the lock is open or missing, do not enter the shed. Return to the cabin and radio Channel 6 immediately. 10. If you see lights in the forest that are not from the marked trail, do not investigate. Lights from the northeast quadrant, between the overlook and the creek junction, are especially important to ignore. 11. At exactly midnight, conduct a perimeter check. Walk clockwise around the cabin at a distance of 15 feet from the walls. Count your steps. The count should be between 200 and 210. If the count is below 200 or above 210, do not complete the circuit. Return to the cabin and radio Channel 11. 12. If you find an animal carcass on or within 10 feet of the trail during a patrol, note the species and location, but do not touch it. If the carcass is arranged in an unnatural position, e.g., limbs extended symmetrically, head facing precisely north, internal organs placed outside the body, return to the cabin and radio Channel 6. 13. Do not use the bathroom between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. If you must relieve yourself during this window, use the exterior northwest corner of the cabin. 14. If your radio receives a transmission on Channel 6 that is not your voice or Superintendent Vickers' voice, do not respond. Turn the radio off, count to 60, turn it back on, and switch to Channel 11. The rules continued for 2 more pages. Specifics about supply inventory, every Sunday at 7 p.m., counted and logged on the clipboard in the desk drawer. Radio check-in times, every 3 hours starting at 7 p.m. Propane heater operation, never above 70 degrees, never off completely. And water purification, boil all creek water for 10 minutes, even in winter. There were maps. One of the patrol loop with distances marked in tenths of a mile, one of the cabin interior with the perimeter check route drawn in red ink, one of the surrounding area with shaded zones labeled Northwest Restricted, Creek Drainage, and Overlook Access Only. I read everything twice. By 5:30 p.m., I had filled a small notebook with my own abbreviated checklist. Times, distances, channels, procedures. The light outside was thickening into dusk, the forest going gray and indistinct. At 5:53 p.m., I locked the door, checked the radio, battery full, squelch adjusted, channel 11 selected, and tested the mag light, beam strong and focused. The blackout curtain for the east window was rolled up on a wooden dowel above the frame. I left it alone. The rules said 10 p.m. At 6 p.m. exactly, the radio crackled. "Charlie 7, this is dispatch." I recognized Vickers's voice. I pressed the transmit button. "Dispatch, this is Charlie 7, on station and reading you clearly. Confirm you have reviewed the operational guidelines. Confirmed, all pages read. Understood. Your first check-in is 1900 hours. First patrol is 2100 hours. Maintain schedule. Dispatch out." The radio went silent. I sat at the desk and watched the clearing disappear into night. At 7 p.m., I radioed in. Vickers acknowledged. At 9 p.m., I laced my boots, clipped the radio to my belt, took the mag light, and stepped onto the porch. The temperature had dropped maybe 15 degrees. My breath misted faintly. The clearing was very dark. The cabin blocked most of the ambient light from the east, and the forest canopy made the sky almost invisible. The maglite beam was sharp and white, a solid cone of light that ended in underbrush 40 feet away. The trail started at the north edge of the clearing, marked by a wooden post with a reflective orange band. I checked my watch, 9:02 p.m. 45 minutes meant return by 9:47 p.m. I walked. The trail was packed dirt and exposed roots, easy to follow with the flashlight. The reflective markers appeared every 30 yards, exactly as they had during the day. I counted my steps out of habit, a way to stay focused. The forest was quiet, not silent. I heard wind in the branches, the distant trickle of water, an owl somewhere far off, but muted, like the sound was being absorbed before it could travel. At 9:16 p.m., I reached the overlook. It was a natural clearing where the ridge dropped away to the northeast, opening a view across the valley. During the day, it had probably been beautiful. Now it was just dark space, a void with no depth or definition. I stood at the edge for 30 seconds, sweeping the maglite beam across the drop. Nothing, I continued. The trail descended through switchbacks, the trees pressing close again. At 9:28 p.m., I reached the creek junction, a wooden bridge over a stream maybe 4 feet wide, water moving fast over rocks. The sound was louder than I expected, a constant white noise that made it harder to hear anything else. I crossed the bridge and started the return leg. The trail rose gently, paralleling the creek for a quarter-mile before angling back toward the cabin. My step count was holding steady, around 1,400 steps per mile, which matched the binder's estimate. At 9:39 p.m., I saw the first set of eyes. They were low to the ground, maybe 20 yards ahead, just off the trail to the left. 2 reflective discs catching the maglite beam. I stopped, held the light steady. The eyes didn't blink or move. Raccoon, probably, or possum. I waited. The eyes stayed fixed, 10 seconds, 20. Then they blinked, both at the same time, and the animal stepped onto the trail. It was a deer, a young buck, maybe 2 years old, small antlers still in velvet. It stood broadside, looking directly at me, ears forward. Normal, deer freeze when startled. I'd seen it 100 times. I took 2 steps forward, expecting it to bolt. It walked backward, not turned and walked away. Walked backward, legs moving in reverse, hooves stepping carefully over roots and rocks, body rigid, head still facing me. It backed into the underbrush and disappeared, still moving in reverse, until I couldn't see it anymore. I stood very still. The rule about bears mentioned verification, checking if they moved on all fours. It didn't say anything about deer. I checked my watch. 9:41 p.m. 6 minutes to return. I walked faster, not quite jogging, keeping the maglite beam on the trail. The cabin appeared at 9:46 p.m. I climbed the porch steps, unlocked the door, stepped inside, and locked it behind me. At 10 p.m., I pulled down the blackout curtain over the east window. The fabric was thick canvas, stitched to a wooden rod that fit into brackets screwed to the window frame. Once it was down, the room felt smaller, more enclosed, At 10:03 p.m., I heard the first knock. 3 slow impacts on the door, evenly spaced. I was sitting at the desk, writing my patrol log. I stopped writing and looked at the door. The knocking came again. Same rhythm, same force. Not frantic or aggressive. Patient. I looked at the window beside the door. The curtain was still open there. If I stood and moved closer, I could see the porch. Rule 7 was very clear. Do not answer. Do not look. I sat still. The knocking repeated 4 more times over the next 10 minutes, then stopped. At midnight, I conducted the perimeter check. The night had gotten colder. The wind had shifted, coming from the northwest now, carrying the smell of wet leaves and cold stone. I left the mag light on the porch and used a smaller LED flashlight from my pack. The perimeter check needed both hands free to count steps accurately. I started at the northeast corner of the cabin, walking clockwise. 15 feet from the wall, I paced carefully, heel to toe on the uneven ground. The grass was damp and slick. 53 steps to the southeast corner, 49 to the southwest, 51 to the northwest, 55 back to the start, 208 total, within range. I exhaled and went back inside. At 12:30 a.m., the radio crackled on channel 11. I reached for it. Charlie 7, this is dispatch, routine check-in. Dispatch, Charlie 7, all clear, patrols on schedule, no incidents. A pause, then, clarify no incidents. I hesitated. The deer walking backward felt worth mentioning, but the rules didn't say to report unusual animal behavior unless it was a bear standing upright or a carcass arranged unnaturally. Confirmed, no incidents per operational guidelines. Understood, next check-in at 03:30, dispatch out. I made coffee on the propane stove. Instant, bad, but it gave me something to do with my hands. The cabin was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The heater clicked softly every few minutes. Outside, the wind moved through the trees with a sound like distant traffic. At 2 a.m., I needed to use the bathroom. Rule 13. Do not use the bathroom between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. I checked my watch. 2:04 a.m., 26 minutes to wait. I sat at the desk and tried to focus on the patrol log, writing detailed descriptions of the trail conditions, the overlook, the creek junction. My handwriting got worse as my bladder got fuller. At 2:17 a.m., I gave up and went to the northwest corner of the cabin. The cold helped. I stood on the porch, then stepped down to the grass, walked to the corner, and relieved myself facing the forest. The wind was louder out here, rushing through the canopy overhead. I finished quickly and went back inside, locked the door, checked the lock twice. At 2:31 a.m., I heard something moving in the storage room, not footsteps. More like something being dragged across the floor, a slow scraping sound, wood on wood. It lasted maybe 15 seconds, then stopped. I stared at the storage room door. The handwritten label was slightly crooked. Storage. Do not enter between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. Rule 8. Do not investigate. Note the time and report. I wrote in my log, 02:31. Dragging sound from storage room, duration approx. 15 seconds. Then I sat very still and listened. Nothing. At 3 a.m., I started the second patrol. The clearing felt different, not visually. The maglite beam cut through the dark exactly as before, but the air had a weight to it, a pressure that made my ears feel full. I checked the tool shed lock first. Intact, a heavy brass padlock looped through the hasp. I tugged it once, solid. I walked the trail. Same route, same distances. The overlook was empty. The creek junction looked exactly as it had before. I saw no animals, no eyes reflecting in the flashlight beam, no movement except wind-stirred branches. At 3:32 a.m., I was back in the cabin. I radioed dispatch and reported the storage room sound. Vickers acknowledged without comment. At 4:15 a.m., I saw the lights. I was sitting at the desk, half dozing, when a flicker of motion through the window pulled me fully awake. I looked out the south window. The blackout curtain was only on the east window, and it was well after 2 a.m., so the restriction had passed. Lights in the forest, northeast quadrant between the overlook and the creek junction. 3 of them, moving slowly, maybe 200 yards out. They looked like flashlights or lanterns, bobbing slightly with each step, weaving through the trees. Hikers. Had to be. Lost hikers, maybe, trying to find the trail in the dark. Rule 10. Do not investigate. Lights from the northeast quadrant are especially important to ignore. I watched them move for another minute. They seemed to be pacing back and forth, covering the same stretch of ground repeatedly. Then they stopped, all 3 at once, and went dark. I waited. They didn't reappear. At 5 a.m., the storage room door rattled, not the sound of something inside. The door itself shook in the frame, the knob turning back and forth like someone was testing the lock. I stood up, hand on the radio. The rattling stopped. At 5:01 a.m., I heard a voice outside. "Ranger." A man's voice, calm and level, coming from the porch. "Ranger, I need assistance." I didn't move. Rule 5. Do not acknowledge anyone who calls you by name. Respond only to Ranger or your badge number. But he'd said Ranger, not my name. The rule was broader than that. The intent was clear. Do not engage with anyone calling to you after dark. "Ranger, can you hear me? I'm injured. I need help." The voice was steady, no pain or distress in it, almost mechanical. I stayed silent. "Ranger," a long pause. "Okay." Footsteps across the porch, down the steps, moving away into the clearing. I counted to 100, then looked out the south window. Nothing. At 5:30 a.m., I rolled up the blackout curtain on the east window. The sky was starting to lighten, a faint gray glow filtering through the trees. The storage room door was quiet. I unlocked it and looked inside. Shelves of supplies, canned food, batteries, propane canisters, rope, tarps, a first aid kit, salt in 5-pound bags. Everything looked orderly. I checked the floor. No drag marks, no disturbed dust. At 6 a.m., the radio crackled. "Charlie 7, this is dispatch. End of shift. Confirm status." "Dispatch, Charlie 7, all clear. Patrols completed. No incidents per guidelines." "Acknowledged. Stand by for daytime operations brief." I waited. Resupply hike is Sunday at 1400 hours. Ranger Hollis will arrive for handoff Sunday at 1700 hours. Until then, monitor Channel 11 and maintain patrol schedule. Dispatch out. I made more coffee and watched the sun come up. Thursday and Friday followed the same pattern. Patrols at 9 p.m., midnight, and 3 a.m. Perimeter check at midnight. Step count always between 200 and 208. Blackout curtain down at 10 p.m., up at 5:30 a.m. Knocking on the door both nights. Thursday it came 3 times. Friday 5 times, always the same patient rhythm. I stopped flinching at the sound by Friday night. The storage room stayed quiet except for one incident on Thursday at 11:47 p.m. A single thump, like something heavy being set down. I noted it and reported it. Vickers acknowledged. I saw the lights again on Friday night. Same location, same pattern. 3 lights moving in the northeast quadrant, pacing back and forth, then going dark all at once. I ignored them. On the Friday midnight patrol, I found the first carcass. It was a raccoon, lying on the trail about halfway to the overlook. Fresh, still warm when I crouched near it with the mag light. No visible wounds, no blood. It was lying on its back with all 4 legs extended straight out, perfectly symmetrical, head pointing north. Rule 12. Note species and location. If arranged unnaturally, return to cabin and radio channel 6. I stood up, backed away from the carcass, and walked quickly back to the cabin. I radioed channel 6. Dispatch, this is Charlie 7. I have a priority report. Vickers's voice came through immediately. Charlie 7, go ahead. Raccoon carcass on the trail, 0.4 miles from the cabin, north leg toward the overlook. Positioned unnaturally, on back, limbs extended symmetrically, head facing north. A pause. Then, understood. Return to the cabin and suspend patrols for the remainder of the night. Resume normal schedule tomorrow at 2100 hours. Do not approach the carcass again. Dispatch out. I locked the door and sat at the desk for the next 3 hours, listening. At 2:12 a.m., I heard footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate, moving from one end to the other, back and forth, back and forth. They stopped at 2:23 a.m. At 4 a.m., something scratched at the door, not clawing, rhythmic, almost like tapping. It lasted 6 minutes. At 6 a.m., Vickers radioed to confirm end of shift. I told her about the footsteps and the scratching. She said, noted, and nothing else. Saturday was quiet. No knocking, no sounds from the storage room, no footsteps. The patrols were uneventful. The raccoon carcass was gone when I reached that section of trail at 9 p.m. No trace of it, no drag marks, no blood on the dirt. At midnight, my perimeter check came up short. I counted carefully, pacing heel to toe, retracing my steps twice to make sure. 193, below 200. The rule was explicit. Do not complete the circuit. I stopped at the northwest corner and walked directly back to the porch, not following the perimeter. Inside, I radioed Channel 11 and reported the count. Understood, Vickers said. Remain inside the cabin until 0600. No further patrols tonight. Acknowledged. I sat in the dark. I turned off all the lights except the small LED on the desk and waited. At 1:37 a.m., I heard something walking around the cabin. Heavy footsteps, crunching through the grass and leaf litter, moving clockwise. I counted the rhythm. The steps were slow and evenly spaced, like someone pacing deliberately. They circled the cabin twice, then stopped at the east wall, directly on the other side of the window with the blackout curtain. Silence for 30 seconds. Then the footsteps moved away, heading north into the forest. I didn't sleep that night. Sunday at 2 p.m., I hiked out to the trailhead and met the resupply team. 2 young rangers I didn't recognize carrying backpacks full of canned goods, propane, and batteries. They didn't speak except to confirm the inventory list. I helped them carry everything back to the cabin, restocked the shelves, and signed the clipboard. They left at 3:15 p.m. At 5 p.m., Ranger Hollis arrived. He was older than I'd expected, maybe 60, with a gray beard trimmed short and a face that looked like it had spent a lot of time outdoors. He shook my hand on the porch, his grip firm and dry. You made it through the first week, he said. Seems like it. He looked at me carefully. You read the binder. Every page. Good. He set his pack down and leaned against the porch railing. Anything you want to ask me before I start my rotation? I thought about the deer walking backward, the lights in the forest, the voice on the porch saying okay before walking away. I thought about the perimeter count coming up short and the footsteps circling the cabin. Does it get easier? I asked. Hollis smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. No, you just get better at following the rules. He took a small notebook from his jacket pocket and flipped it open. Your log mentions the raccoon carcass on Friday. Did you see anything else arranged like that? No. Good. When you do, the protocol is the same. Report it. Don't touch it. Suspend patrols. Sometimes there's more than one. He made a note in his book. The lights you saw in the northeast quadrant, did they ever cross the trail? Not that I saw. If they do, radio channel 6 immediately and stay inside until dawn. Don't look at them directly if they get within 50 yards of the cabin. I nodded. Hollis flipped a page. Perimeter count on Saturday, 193. That's low. Lowest I've heard in a while. He looked up. Did you notice anything different about the clearing? Any new trees, rocks, structures? No, it looked the same. Check again during daylight before you leave. Walk the perimeter at 15 feet and see if something's changed. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. He closed the notebook. If you find something, take a photo and send it to Vickers. Don't move it. Don't touch it. Understood. He picked up his pack. One more thing. If you ever hear someone calling your actual name, not Ranger, not your badge number, but your real name, don't respond and don't try to figure out who it is. Lock yourself in the cabin and wait for dawn. Don't look out the windows. Don't check the door. Just wait. Has that happened to you? Once. He didn't elaborate. I shouldered my own pack and started toward the trail. Hollis called after me. Hey, I turned. You're doing fine. Most people don't make it past the third night. You follow the rules, you stay consistent, you'll be okay. I nodded and walked into the forest. I spent Sunday night at a motel in Gatlinburg sleeping for 12 hours straight. Monday, I drove back to my house, paid some bills, talked to my daughter on the phone. She told me about a science project, a dance at school, normal life. It felt distant, like I was watching it through glass. Tuesday afternoon, I drove back to the trailhead. The walk to Charlie 7 felt longer this time, the orange markers stretching out endlessly through the trees. At 6 p.m., I radioed in. Vickers confirmed. The rotation started again. Wednesday night, the rules changed. I found the amendment sheet on the desk when I arrived, a single piece of yellow paper clipped to the front of the binder. It was dated that morning. Amendments to operational guidelines. Effective immediately. On the midnight perimeter check is now mandatory regardless of count. If the count is below 200 or above 210, complete the circuit but do not deviate from the 15-foot distance. Report the count on channel 11 immediately after returning inside. 2. If you hear your name called from outside the cabin, you must verify the voice. Respond once with, "Identify yourself." If the response is anything other than Ranger Hollis or Superintendent Vickers, do not engage further. 3. All carcasses found on the trail must now be reported immediately on Channel 6, regardless of positioning. Do not approach within 10 feet of any carcass. 4. Between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., the blackout curtain on the east window must remain down. Between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., the curtain must be up. Do not look out the east window while the curtain is being raised or lowered. 5. If the tool shed lock is missing or open, do not enter the shed. Mark the location with an orange flag supplied in the storage room and maintain a distance of at least 30 feet from the shed for the remainder of your shift. 6. Radio check-ins are now required every 2 hours instead of every 3 hours. Check-in times: 19 so, 21 hour, 23 hour, 1 hour, 3 hour, hour. The handwriting at the bottom was Vickers's. Compliance is non-negotiable. SV. I read the amendments 3 times, then updated my notebook with the new times and procedures. At 9 p.m., I started the first patrol. The trail was wet. It had rained earlier in the day, and the maglite beam reflected off puddles and slick leaves. I counted my steps carefully, watching for uneven footing. At the overlook, I stopped and swept the beam across the valley. Nothing, just darkness and the faint sound of wind. At 9:21 p.m., I found the second carcass, a doe lying across the trail just before the creek junction. She was on her side, legs folded naturally, head resting on the ground, fresh, still warm, no visible wounds. Rule 3 of the amendments: report immediately. I backed up 10 feet and keyed the radio. Dispatch, this is Charlie 7. Carcass on trail, 0.9 miles from cabin, approaching creek junction. Deer, adult doe, no visible trauma, natural positioning. Acknowledged. Do not approach. Continue patrol and report any additional findings. Dispatch out. I circled wide around the doe, stepping off the trail into the underbrush to maintain distance, then rejoined the trail on the other side of the creek junction. The rest of the patrol was clear. At midnight, I conducted the perimeter check. 212 steps. Above the threshold, I completed the circuit as instructed and radioed the count to Vickers. "Understood," she said. "Remain alert. Dispatch out." At 2 a.m., I raised the blackout curtain on the east window without looking outside. I stood to the side, reached up, unhooked the rod from the brackets, and rolled the fabric up quickly. Then I stepped back. The window showed the clearing and the edge of the forest, faintly visible in the ambient starlight. I turned away and sat at the desk. At 2:04 a.m., I saw movement in my peripheral vision. Something walking across the clearing from the northeast, moving toward the cabin. I kept my eyes on the desk, on the patrol log, on my hands holding the pen. The movement stopped outside the east window. I counted my breaths. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. At 2:09 a.m., it walked away. At 3 a.m., I started the second patrol. The doe was gone from the trail. I checked carefully, sweeping the mag light across the area. No drag marks, no blood, no sign it had ever been there. At 5:37 a.m., just after I'd raised the blackout curtain for the day, I heard a voice from the storage room. Not a sound, a voice, speaking clearly, conversationally, like someone on a phone call. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was friendly, relaxed. It lasted maybe 20 seconds, then stopped. I reported it at the 6 a.m. check-in. Vickers acknowledged without comment. A Thursday night brought fog. It rolled in from the valley around 8 p.m., thick and gray, reducing visibility to maybe 15 feet. The mag light beam diffused into a soft glow, useless beyond 10 feet. At 9 p.m., I started the patrol anyway. The rules didn't mention weather exceptions. The fog made the forest feel enclosed, like the trees were pressing in from all sides. I could hear water dripping from leaves, the creek running louder than usual, my own footsteps muffled and strange. The orange markers were harder to spot, appearing suddenly out of the murk. At 9:28 p.m., I heard something moving parallel to the trail. Off to my left, maybe 20 feet away, something large was walking through the underbrush. Slow, deliberate steps, keeping pace with me. I stopped. It stopped. I started walking again. It started walking. I couldn't see it through the fog, just the sound of footsteps, branches moving, leaves crunching. At 9:35 p.m., it spoke. "Ranger," a woman's voice, clear and close. I kept walking. Rule 5, do not acknowledge. "Ranger, I'm lost. Can you help me find the trail?" The voice was coming from exactly where the footsteps were, 20 feet to my left, hidden in the fog. I walked faster. "Please, I've been walking for hours. I can see your light." The footsteps kept pace. At 9:41 p.m., I reached the overlook. The fog was thicker here, completely obscuring the valley. I turned and started the descent toward the creek junction. The footsteps didn't follow. The rest of the patrol was quiet. I returned to the cabin at 9:48 p.m. and locked the door. At midnight, the perimeter check was difficult. The fog made it hard to judge distance from the cabin walls. I counted steps carefully, pacing slowly, using the LED flash to mark the corners. 206, within range. At 1 a.m. during the radio check-in, Vickers sounded tense. "Charlie 7, confirm you are inside the cabin with the door locked." "Confirmed. Do not open the door or windows until the fog clears. Suspend all patrols until visibility improves." "Understood. If you hear anyone outside, do not respond. If you hear movement on the porch or against the walls, ignore it. Maintain radio contact every 2 hours as scheduled. Dispatch out." The fog pressed against the windows like something solid. At 1:32 a.m., something climbed onto the roof. I heard it clearly. Footsteps moving across the shingles, slow and heavy, walking from the chimney to the east end of the cabin. Back and forth, back and forth. The ceiling creaked slightly with each step. I sat at the desk and wrote in the log, keeping my pen moving, focusing on the details of the evening patrols. The footsteps continued for 43 minutes, then stopped. At 2:41 a.m., I heard scratching at the east window. Not on the glass. On the frame, like fingernails or claws dragging across the wood. Methodical, patient, tracing the same pattern over and over. At 3 a.m., I radioed in. Vickers asked if I was maintaining position. I confirmed. She said, "Good, stay there." At 4:15 a.m., the fog started to thin. By 5 a.m., it was almost gone, just wisps moving through the trees. I could see the clearing again, empty and still. At 6 a.m., Vickers cleared me to resume normal operations. "Patrols tonight at standard times," she said. "Fog is not expected to return. Dispatch out." I made coffee and watched the sun rise through the east window. Friday night was calm. No fog, no unusual sounds, no encounters on the trails. The patrols were routine. The perimeter check was 204 steps. I started to relax, thinking maybe the worst was over. At 11:43 p.m., the toolshed lock was open. I checked it at the start of the midnight patrol, same as always. The padlock was hanging loose from the hasp, unlatched. The shed door was closed but not secured. Rule 5 of the amendments: mark it with an orange flag and maintain 30 feet distance. I went to the storage room, found a roll of orange surveyor's tape, and tied a long strip to a branch 15 feet from the shed. Visible, obvious. Then I backed away and continued the patrol. At 1:12 a.m., I saw someone standing near the shed. I was returning from the creek junction when the maglite beam caught a figure at the edge of the clearing, maybe 40 feet away. Tall, wearing dark clothes, standing perfectly still. I stopped walking. The figure didn't move. I angled the maglite to the side, lighting the ground near the figure instead of shining it directly on them. In the reflected light, I could see more detail. A man, average build, wearing what looked like a Park Service jacket. His face was turned toward me, but I couldn't make out features. "Ranger Hollis?" I called. No response. "Superintendent Vickers?" Nothing. Amendment 2. If the response is anything other than Ranger Hollis or Superintendent Vickers, do not engage further. I backed toward the cabin, keeping the maglite on the ground near the figure. He still didn't move. At the porch steps, I turned and went inside, locked the door. I watched through the south window. The figure stood near the shed for another 10 minutes, then walked slowly into the forest, heading northeast. At 3 a.m., I skipped the patrol and radioed Vickers to explain. "Understood," she said. "You made the right choice. The shed will be secured during daylight hours. Do not approach it until you receive confirmation that the lock has been replaced. Dispatch out." At 5:53 a.m., I heard knocking at the door, different from the usual knocking. Faster, more insistent. 3 quick raps, pause, 3 more. I stayed in the chair at the desk. The knocking repeated, then a voice. "Ranger, it's Hollis. I need to talk to you." I looked at the window beside the door. I couldn't see the porch from this angle without standing and moving closer. Amendment 2. Verify the voice. "Identify yourself," I said, loud enough to be heard through the door. "It's Hollis. Open the door." "State your full name and badge number." Silence. "Then, you know who I am. Open the door." I didn't respond. The voice changed. Not in pitch or tone, but in quality. Flatter, less human. "Open the door." I sat very still. At 6:02 a.m., the knocking stopped. Saturday, a maintenance crew hiked in at noon and replaced the tool shed lock with a heavier one, a reinforced padlock that needed 2 keys to open. They didn't speak to me except to confirm the work was complete. They were gone by 1:30 p.m. That night, I found a second amendment sheet on the desk. Additional amendments, effective immediately. 1. If the storage room door is found unlocked or open during restricted hours, 8 p.m. to 5 a.m., exit the cabin immediately and proceed to the tool shed. Wait there until dawn, then radio channel 6. 2. Do not consume any food or water left outside the cabin, even if it appears to be official resupply. All resupply deliveries occur on Sundays between 1400 and 1600 hours only. 3. If you encounter another ranger or Park Service employee on the trail after dark, ask them to confirm the current date and their assigned station. If they cannot answer both correctly, do not approach within 20 feet and return to the cabin immediately. 4. The bathroom restriction, 2 a.m. to 2:30 a.m., is now extended to 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. 5. If your perimeter count is below 190 or above 220, do not complete the circuit. Return to the cabin, lock all doors and windows, and radio channel 6 immediately. Do not conduct any further patrols that night. 6. All wildlife observed during patrols must now be noted in the log, including species, location, behavior, and direction of travel. Report any wildlife moving in reverse or exhibiting symmetrical movement patterns immediately on Channel 6. I updated my notebook and started the evening routine. At 9 p.m., I found the third carcass, a coyote lying in the center of the trail at the overlook. On its back, legs extended symmetrically, head facing north, eyes open, tongue protruding slightly. Fresh. I radioed Channel 6. Dispatch Charlie 7, carcass at overlook, positioned unnaturally. Coyote, adult, symmetrical positioning, head north. Acknowledged. Do not approach. Return to cabin and suspend patrols. You are authorized to resume at 0300 if no further anomalies occur. Dispatch out. I walked back quickly, checking over my shoulder every few steps. The forest felt like it was watching. At 11:37 p.m., I heard something running around the cabin. Fast footsteps, circling clockwise, moving at a steady sprint, around and around, lap after lap. I counted 12 complete circuits before it stopped. At midnight, I was supposed to do the perimeter check. I radioed Vickers for guidance. Negative, she said. Wait until 0300. Conduct both the perimeter check and the patrol at that time. At 1:48 a.m., the storage room door rattled violently for 30 seconds, then stopped. At 2:33 a.m., I heard my daughter's voice outside the cabin. Dad? I stood up from the desk, heart hammering. Dad, are you there? I'm scared. Amendment 2. Verify the voice. Identify yourself, I said. It's Emma, Dad. I got lost. Please help me. My daughter's name was Emma. My daughter was 12 years old and 200 miles away, at home with her mother. State the current date and your location, I said, forcing my voice steady. I don't know. I'm lost. Please open the door. I backed away from the door and sat down. Dad? The voice was perfect. Exact pitch, exact cadence. The way she said Dad with a slight emphasis on the D. The way she always did. Please. I put my hands over my ears and counted to 100. When I lowered my hands, the voice was gone. At 3 a.m., I conducted the perimeter check and the patrol. 207 steps. The coyote was gone from the overlook. I noted in the log, no wildlife observed during patrol. At 6 a.m., I reported everything to Vickers. She listened without interrupting. You followed the protocols correctly, she said when I finished. That's all we ask. What's doing this? I asked. A long pause. We don't know, Vickers said. We've been staffing this station for 32 years. It's always been like this. The rules work. Follow them and you'll be safe. And if I don't follow them, then you won't finish your shift. She disconnected. Sunday Hollis arrived for the handoff at 5 p.m. He looked tired, older than the week before. Rough rotation? I asked. They're all rough. He set his pack down. Vickers told me about the voice. Your daughter's voice. I nodded. That's new. I've never heard about it doing that before. He pulled out his notebook. Did it say anything else? Ask you to do anything specific? Just to open the door. And you didn't? No. Good. He made a note. If it happens again, don't engage at all, not even to verify. If you hear a family member's voice, treat it like you'd treat someone calling your name. Ignore it completely. It knew her name, I said. Hollis looked at me. It knows a lot of things. That doesn't mean it understands them. It's just using words that work. He flipped to a new page in his notebook. One more thing. The carcasses are increasing in frequency. That usually means it's testing the boundaries. The more you see, the more careful you need to be about the rules. Double-check everything. Times, distances, protocols. One mistake and it finds a way in. A way in where? Here, the cabin. You. He closed the notebook. Just follow the rules. I left him on the porch and hiked out as the sun was setting. The third week, I started to notice patterns. The knocking on the door always came in groups of 3. The footsteps circling the cabin always moved clockwise. The lights in the northeast quadrant always appeared in sets of 3, pacing the same route, disappearing simultaneously. The carcasses followed a pattern, too. Wednesday night, nothing. Thursday, a rabbit at the creek junction, lying on its back, legs extended. Friday, a fox at the halfway point between the cabin and the overlook, positioned identically. Saturday, a bobcat at the overlook, same positioning. Each one was gone by the next patrol. I reported them all on Channel 6. Vickers acknowledged each one with the same response. Understood. Continue operations. On Saturday night, the perimeter count dropped to 186. I stopped at the northwest corner, exactly as the rules specified, and radioed Channel 6 immediately. Dispatch Charlie 7, perimeter count 186, returning to cabin. Acknowledged. Lock all doors and windows. Suspend patrols. Remain inside until dawn. Do not respond to any sounds outside. Dispatch out. At 12:41 a.m., something started digging under the cabin. I heard it clearly, scraping, scratching, the sound of earth being moved. It started under the southeast corner and slowly worked its way around the foundation, circling clockwise. The sound continued for 2 hours and 17 minutes, then stopped. At 3 a.m., I heard breathing outside the east window. Slow, steady, rhythmic, in and out, not labored or distressed, just breathing. At 4:33 a.m., the breathing stopped. At 6 a.m., I unlocked the door and stepped onto the porch. The clearing looked normal. I walked the perimeter in daylight, examining the ground near the foundation. No sign of digging, no disturbed earth, no holes, no tracks. But the clearing was smaller. I could see it clearly in the daylight. The tree line had moved inward, maybe 5 feet, all the way around. The mowed grass stopped where it had stopped before, but the forest edge was closer. Not dramatically closer, but enough to be certain. I took photos and sent them to Vickers with my phone when I hiked out that afternoon. The fourth week brought new amendments. Critical protocols, effective immediately. 1. If the clearing appears smaller or the tree line has moved, do not conduct patrols. Remain in the cabin from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and radio for instructions. 2. All doors and windows must be checked and locked at the top of each hour between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. This includes the storage room door during restricted hours. 3. If you hear digging sounds under the cabin, place a line of salt along all interior doorways and windowsills. Salt is supplied in the storage room. Use 5-pound bags, one line approximately 2 inches wide. Do not break the salt line until dawn. 4. Do not look at the ceiling between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. If you must move through the cabin during this hour, keep your eyes on the floor. 5. If your radio receives a transmission that includes your daughter's name or the name of any family member, turn the radio off immediately. Do not turn it back on until your next scheduled check-in time. 6. Emergency supply drop can be requested on Channel 6 if you are unable to complete patrols for more than 2 consecutive nights. You will be extracted and replaced if emergency conditions persist for more than 72 hours. The protocols felt heavier than the previous rules, more specific, more urgent. Sunday night, I followed the new procedures. Hourly door and window checks, salt lines laid down at 8 p.m., 2 inches wide along every threshold and sill. I used 3 of the 5-pound bags. At 9:36 p.m., something tested the salt line at the east window. I heard it dragging something across the exterior wall, scraping down toward the windowsill. Then a pause. Then the scraping moved away. At midnight, I heard it again at the door, scraping down the frame to the threshold. Pause. Retreat. At 2:18 a.m., it tried the bathroom window. Same pattern. At 3:30 a.m., I heard movement on the roof again, but this time I kept my eyes on the floor, staring at the salt line in front of the desk, counting the granules, focusing on the texture of the wood beneath them. The ceiling creaked directly above me. I didn't look up. At 4 a.m., the movement stopped. Monday night, the tree line had moved again, another 5 feet inward. The clearing was noticeably smaller now, the forest pressing close on all sides. I radioed Vickers at 6 p.m. Dispatch, Charlie 7, tree line has advanced. Request instructions per new protocols. Acknowledged. You are restricted to cabin operations. No patrols until further notice. Maintain all other procedures, perimeter checks, radio schedule, supply inventory. A specialist team will arrive Wednesday for assessment. Dispatch out. Understood. I spent Monday and Tuesday nights locked in the cabin, following the hourly door and window checks, maintaining the salt lines, conducting perimeter checks at midnight. The counts were dropping steadily. Monday, 179. Tuesday, 168. The clearing was shrinking. Wednesday at 2 p.m., 3 people arrived. Vickers, Hollis, and a woman I didn't recognize, younger, wearing hiking gear and carrying surveying equipment. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, Vickers said. She's with the Park Service Research Division. She's going to take some measurements. Dr. Chen nodded at me and immediately started setting up a laser rangefinder on a tripod in the center of the clearing. She worked quickly, taking distance readings to various points along the tree line, recording data on a tablet. Hollis pulled me aside. How are you holding up? I'm fine, following the protocols. Vickers says you haven't missed a single procedure. That's good. He lowered his voice. The tree line advancement is unusual. It's happened before, but not this fast. Normally it moves maybe a foot per year. This is 5 feet per week. What does that mean? We're not sure. Chen thinks it might be a response to something you're doing or not doing, but we haven't identified what. The rules are working. You're still safe, but something's changed. Dr. Chen called out from the tripod. Superintendent, can you come look at this? Vickers and Hollis walked over. I followed. Chen pointed at the tablet screen. The clearing is currently 68 feet in diameter, measured from the cabin center point. According to the baseline survey from 2015, it should be 92 feet. 24 feet in 10 years? Vickers said. No, 24 feet in the last month. Chen pulled up another screen. I accessed the metadata from the photos ranger. She looked at me. What's your name? Marcus. Ranger Marcus sent you on Saturday. I compared them to archival images from the station log. The clearing was 92 feet 4 weeks ago. It's been losing approximately 6 feet per week since then. Hollis looked at me. When did you start your rotation? 4 weeks ago. First shift was October 9th. So the advancement started when you arrived, Vickers said. Correlation isn't causation, Chen said, but the timing is notable. They conferred quietly for several minutes. I stood near the cabin and watched the tree line. It looked perfectly normal, natural forest, trees of varying ages and species, underbrush thick and healthy, but I knew it had been farther away. I'd walked the clearing perimeter enough times to be certain. Vickers came over. We're going to adjust the protocols. The rules are working, but we need to slow the advancement. Starting tonight, you'll be following an emergency rotation. She handed me a new sheet of yellow paper. Emergency rotation protocols. 1. Remain inside the cabin from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. No outdoor patrols. No perimeter checks. 2. Every hour on the hour, stand at the center of the main room and state aloud, this space is maintained. This boundary is held. Repeat 3 times. 3. Place lit candles on all 4 windowsills at 8 p.m. Use the candles supplied in the storage room. Do not let them go out before 5 a.m. 4. If a candle goes out before 5 a.m., relight it immediately and add an additional salt line in a 1-foot radius around that window. 5. Do not sleep for more than 30 consecutive minutes. Set a timer. 6. Radio check-ins every hour. 7. If the clearing shrinks below 50 feet in diameter, you will be extracted immediately. A measurement team will check daily at 1400 hours. I read it twice. How long will this last? Until the advancement stops or reverses, Vickers said. Could be days, could be weeks. What if it doesn't stop? She didn't answer. The team left at 3:45 p.m. I prepared for the night. The emergency rotation was exhausting. Every hour, I stood in the center of the room and spoke the words. This space is maintained. This boundary is held. 3 times, clear and steady. The first night, it felt ridiculous. By the third night, it felt necessary. The candles were thick pillars, unscented white wax. I placed them on the windowsills at 8 p.m. and watched them burn. They guttered occasionally when wind pressed against the glass, but they stayed lit. On Thursday night, the northeast candle went out at 11:42 p.m. I crossed the room and relit it with matches from the storage room. Then I poured a new salt line in a 1-foot radius around the east window, using half of a 5-pound bag. At 3:17 a.m., I heard scratching at that window again, testing the new salt line. It scraped for 2 minutes, then moved away. Friday night, both the east and south candles went out within 10 minutes of each other at 1:33 and 1:41 a.m. I relit them and added salt lines using another full bag. The scratching came at both windows, systematically testing each one. Saturday night, all 4 candles went out simultaneously at 2:04 a.m. I moved fast, relighting them one by one, checking the wicks, making sure they caught properly. Then I poured salt lines around all 4 windows, using the last 2 bags from the storage room. At 2:37 a.m., something heavy hit the door. Not knocking, impact, like a body slamming against the wood. It hit again and again. I braced the door with the desk chair, wedging it under the knob. The impacts continued, steady and relentless, for 19 minutes. At 2:56 a.m., they stopped. Sunday at 2 p.m., Dr. Chen returned with the measurement equipment. She set up the rangefinder and took readings. When she was finished, she looked at me. 62 feet, 6 more feet gone in 4 days. She radioed Vickers. Advancement is continuing. Recommend extraction if it drops below 55 feet. Vickers's voice crackled through the radio. Acknowledged. Continue emergency protocols. Daily measurements at 1400 hours. Dispatch out. Chen packed up her equipment. Are you okay? I'm following the protocols. That's not what I asked. I looked at the tree line. I don't know. She nodded and left. That night, I started the routine again. Candles at 8 p.m. Hourly declarations. Radio check-ins. 30-minute sleep intervals. Timer beeping me awake every time I started to drift deeper. At midnight, the storage room door opened. I heard it clearly. The latch clicking, the hinges creaking, the door swinging wide. Rule 1 of the latest amendments. If the storage room door is found unlocked or open during restricted hours, exit the cabin immediately. But the emergency protocol said to remain inside from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Contradictory instructions. I sat at the desk and stared at the storage room door. It was fully open now, showing the shelves inside, the supplies arranged neatly. Nothing looked disturbed. Nothing looked wrong. I radioed Channel 6. Dispatch Charlie 7, storage room door is open during restricted hours, requesting clarification on protocols. Vickers responded within seconds. Charlie 7, remain inside. Do not enter the storage room. Do not look directly into the storage room. Monitor from your current position. Acknowledged. I turned my chair so my back was to the storage room. I stared at the east window, at the candle burning steadily on the sill, at the salt line glowing faintly in the candlelight. Behind me, I heard something moving in the storage room. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, walking from the shelves toward the door. I didn't turn around. The footsteps stopped at the threshold between the storage room and the main room. I could feel something there, standing just behind me, close enough to touch. This space is maintained, I said aloud. even though it wasn't the scheduled hour. This boundary is held. I repeated it 3 times. The presence receded. The footsteps moved back into the storage room. At 5 a.m., the door closed by itself. Monday, the clearing measured 58 feet. Tuesday, 55 feet. Wednesday, Dr. Chen arrived at 2 p.m. and measured 52 feet. She radioed Vickers immediately. We're approaching extraction threshold. Understood. Prepare for evacuation if it drops below 50. Chen looked at me. Pack your essentials. Be ready to leave quickly if we give the order. I nodded. That night was the worst. All 4 candles went out at 9:47 p.m. within seconds of each other. I relit them, added salt lines, and stood at the center of the room. This space is maintained. This boundary is held. At 10:32 p.m., the candles went out again. I relit them, checked the wicks, checked the wax, made sure everything was correct. At 11:18 p.m., they went out again. I was running out of salt. I used the remaining supply to reinforce the lines that were already down, making them thicker, pressing the granules firmly against the floor and sills. At midnight, when I stood to make the hourly declaration, I saw something outside the east window. A face, pale, indistinct, pressed against the glass, watching me. I kept my eyes forward, not looking directly at it. This space is maintained. This boundary is held. The face didn't move. This space is maintained. This boundary is held. It tilted slightly, like a dog hearing an unfamiliar sound. This space is maintained. This boundary is held. It vanished. At 1:47 a.m., something started scratching at all 4 windows simultaneously. The sound was overwhelming, a chorus of scraping and clawing, rhythmic and relentless. I sat at the desk and wrote in the log, documenting every detail, keeping my hands busy, focusing on the words. At 2:33 a.m., my timer beeped, pulling me out of a microsleep I hadn't realized I'd fallen into. I stood and checked the candles, still burning. At 3 a.m., I made the declaration. At 3:41 a.m., the scratching stopped. At 4 a.m., the radio crackled. Charlie 7, this is dispatch. Go ahead, dispatch. Dr. Chen will arrive at 0800 for emergency measurement. If the clearing is below 50 feet, you will be extracted immediately. Prepare for evacuation. Dispatch out. I packed my essentials. Clothes, notebook, radio, maglite. Everything else could stay. At 5 a.m., the candles were still burning. I let them burn down naturally, watching the wax pool and drip. At 6 a.m., dawn light filtered through the windows. The clearing was very small now. The trees seemed to press against the glass. At 8 a.m., Dr. Chen arrived with Hollis and Vickers. Chen set up the rangefinder and took the measurement. 47 feet. Evacuate, Vickers said. I grabbed my pack and followed them out of the cabin. Hollis locked the door behind us. We walked quickly down the trail, not speaking, single file. The forest felt different, closer, denser. The trees leaning inward over the path. At the trailhead, Vickers turned to me. You followed every protocol correctly. This isn't your fault. What happens now? I asked. The station gets shut down. We seal the cabin and monitor from a distance. If the clearing stabilizes, we might try again with a different rotation structure. If it doesn't... She trailed off. What? Then we lose Charlie 7. Hollis put a hand on my shoulder. You lasted longer than most would have. 4 weeks under those conditions, following every rule perfectly. That's rare. They drove me back to Gatlinburg. I slept for 18 hours straight in the motel. On Friday, Vickers called me. The clearing stabilized at 46 feet. It stopped shrinking on Wednesday night, right after you left. So it was me. We don't know that. Correlation isn't causation, remember? She paused. We're going to try a modified protocol. Different schedule, different procedures. If it works, we might be able to reopen Charlie 7. And if it doesn't, then we add it to the list of stations we've lost. How many have you lost? Enough. She told me I'd be paid for the full rotation, including the early extraction. She told me I was welcome to apply for other positions in the park system, standard day shifts, normal ranger work. I thanked her and hung up. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Hollis. They're reopening Charlie 7. New protocols, new schedule. 60-hour rotations instead of 5-day blocks. They think shorter exposures might prevent the advancement. Did they find out what was causing it? No, but the new ranger's been there 3 nights and the clearing is stable. Measured it this morning, still 46 feet. That's good. Yeah. He paused. I wanted to ask you something. Did you ever figure out what you were supposed to do differently? Some rule you missed, some procedure you got wrong? I thought about it. The 4 weeks of patrols, the perimeter checks, the salt lines, the candles. Every rule followed exactly as written. Every protocol executed perfectly. No, I said. I followed everything. That's what I thought. He sighed. Sometimes I think that's the real rule, the one they don't write down, that it doesn't matter what you do. You're just there to hold the line until you can't anymore, and then someone else takes over. That's a terrible rule. Yeah, but it works. We said goodbye. I drive past Gatlinburg sometimes on my way to other jobs, day shifts at visitor centers, trail maintenance crews, routine park operations. Normal work. I see the road that leads up to Cades Cove, and I think about the trailhead, the orange markers, the cabin in the clearing. I think about the rules. I wonder if the new ranger hears knocking at night, if they see lights in the northeast quadrant, if they've found carcasses on the trail positioned just so. I wonder if they've started a notebook, writing down times and distances, logging every anomaly, every deviation from normal. I wonder if they've heard their own name called from the forest. I hope they follow the rules, all of them, exactly as written. I hope it's enough, but I'm not going back to find out. Last week I got a package in the mail, no return address. Inside was a yellow sheet of paper and a brief note from Vickers. The note said, "Thought you'd want to see this. The rotation is stable. SV." The yellow paper was worn, creased from being folded and unfolded many times. It was a new rule list, typed on the same manual typewriter. Station Charlie 7, updated protocols. And below that, in handwriting, I recognized as Hollis's. For the next ranger, follow these exactly. They work if you let them. I read through the list. Some rules were the same, some were different. New procedures, new times, new boundaries. At the bottom, someone had added a handwritten note in pencil, recent from the current ranger. Week 3, clearing stable at 46 feet, no advancement. Saw something at the east window last night, but didn't look directly at it. Candles stayed lit. Whatever Marcus did, it helped. I folded the paper carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I don't know if what I did helped. I don't know if following the rules perfectly was enough or if I just held the line until my time ran out. I don't know what's in those woods, what presses against the salt lines at night, what tests the boundaries and speaks with familiar voices. But I know the rules work, not perfectly, not forever. Just long enough. Someone else is at Charlie 7 now, standing in that shrinking clearing, watching the tree line, lighting candles at dusk. They're reading the same yellow pages I read, following the same procedures, speaking the same words into the dark. This space is maintained, this boundary is held. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Hold the line, follow the rules, and pass them on when our time is up. I hope the new ranger understands that. I hope they're more careful than I was. I hope they never have to find out what happens when the rules stop working, because eventually they will. They always do.